Well, welcome everybody to our Colorado Proud webinar. We are very fortunate today to have an amazing group of experts here to talk about the Colorado Food Summit that will be happening in December of this year. We've got Becca Jablonski, and she is the co-director of the Food Systems Institute at Colorado State University, as well as an associate professor in the Department of Agricultural and Resource Economics. Her research is focused on roles of cities in leveraging food policies to achieve progress towards sustainable development. We are also lucky to have Monique Mares, and Monique is a food systems practitioner with experience at every scale of the sector, from grassroots community organizing to international trade policy. Her consulting practice, Optimizo LLC, I apologize, provides strategic services to food and agricultural businesses, governments, and nonprofits in an effort to build a more resilient, just food system. We also have Jay Links, and Jay is a political artist that is born and raised here in Denver, Colorado. He has found passion designing flyers, posters, logos, and more for different organizations and creating art pieces focused on representing food access specifically in his community. We're also joined by Joelle McClurg, and Joelle oversees all of Blueprint projects and initiatives, as well as co-leads the process for organizational transformation in concert with community stakeholders. We have Libby Christensen, and Libby is our Colorado State University Extension statewide food and agricultural specialist. She has 15 years of experience working in food systems with a focus on the interconnectivity of rural and urban places through food and agriculture. This panel of experts is outstanding. There's much more to them than just a little bit I shared, but just wanted to at least give you a brief share of who we have on. And just a couple things. When we're not speaking, let's just mute our microphones. It helps our speaker have focus and not have background noise. We welcome questions, encourage them. Just raise your hand or put it in the chat and we'll make sure they get addressed. We will ask for questions throughout the webinar. And again, if you have any questions after, maybe you thought of something, go ahead and send them to me, barb.howe@state.co.us, and I'll be happy to get them to the person you're talking to. Well, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Becca, and Becca's going to talk to us about the Food Summit.
Well, hi, Barb, and thanks so much for having us on today. The Colorado Food Summit is, I think, a really fantastic event that tries to bring together stakeholders from across the agricultural and food system in our state. And I think it's the only event that really does this at a statewide level, bringing together folks from input suppliers and farmers and ranchers of different commodities and scales, all the way throughout the supply chain, and then to thinking about folks who work in community and economic development, as well as all different types of buyers and consumers. So it's a really great event. So I thought I'd start today just by giving a little bit of background about how the event was actually started, or how we got the idea for the event. So I'm taking us back now to the before times in 2016, 2017, and Libby Christensen, myself, Greg Graff, Don Thilmany, we're part of the leadership team for the Colorado Blueprint of Food and Agriculture. And Libby, if you don't mind, maybe you could put a link in the chat box. Thank you. And so this was something that was really led by the Governor's Food Systems Advisory Council, the CSU Ag Experiment Station, and the College of Agriculture. At the time, we also worked really closely with Nourish Colorado as one of the key partners representing more of the food access and food security side of things, and a number of other folks, in particular the Colorado Department of Agriculture. And so what we realized was that there really weren't any clear reports that were coming out statewide that tried to link together opportunities across sort of the food access, food security space and farming and ranching. So as the Governor's Food Systems Advisory Council, we had identified these different reports that exist, and most of them tended to be in more of the food access, food security space, or in sort of the production ag or, particularly water space, but nothing really linking those. And so we set out on this process, building on something that had been done 5 years earlier on documenting some of the value chains, really the economic components of the food system, and building upon that with the public attitude survey that the Colorado Department of Agriculture leads every 5 years, and with a series of different statewide listening sessions. So these listening sessions took place in lots of different regions across the state. And so anyway, we did this big comprehensive process. We ended up with these different, this report and these individual regional reports, and we did and talked to a bunch of folks, and I think there's some projects that came out of that. But what we realized was that at the same time we were doing this, the city and county of Denver at the time was leading their own food visioning process. And that visioning process was also resulted in these series of recommendations. And so one day, the group that was leading the Denver process and the group that was leading the statewide process actually sat down and started talking to each other, right? Imagine that, the city and the state having these conversations. And we realized that there were all of these different things that we could do that would support each other, right? And we all had these sort of different opportunities and these different challenges, and that working together, there would be some cool things that could happen. And so we ended up applying for a grant together through the Foundation for Food and Ag Research, FFAR, that we were fortunate enough to get. And that project is really focused on trying to understand how Denver's purchasing could be leveraged to not just meet Denver's goals, but to also create new types of opportunities throughout the state, and to really bring in statewide stakeholders and having that conversation. Because of course, one of the challenges is that the city really holds the power in the ability to set their procurement policies, but inherently those policies are going to have these broader regional and statewide impacts. And so as part of this grant, we held the first Colorado Food Summit. And of course, it was much smaller than what we do now. And it was, I think, a much less inclusive planning process. And it was a little bit more focused initially on really thinking around that sort of procurement process and sort of the opportunities throughout the value chain. But anyway, that was what set this course where we are now. So the second year that we held the summit, based on a lot of feedback that we received from partners, we tried to create a planning process that was much more inclusive of the diversity of folks across the food system. And we really worked hard to try to think about, how do you create a planning committee that really is going to reflect, right, the diversity that we're trying to capture here? It's not an easy process. And we thought it really just didn't make sense to have a seat designated for Colorado potatoes and another seat designated for peaches. What we decided to do was actually bring together the representatives from all of the local food policy councils and the state food policy council. So the challenge with doing that is that we have some regions that are better represented by those councils than others. And I would say commodity agriculture tends to be less represented on those councils than do some other sectors. So the Colorado Department of Agriculture was brought in as a key partner, and we have CSU Extension also as a key partner. And so that's what we did for the statewide steering committee in the second year of the Food Summit and in the current year. And the other thing is that as I think we've been able to build a better and better event, we've been able to bring in other really key stakeholders. So folks like Joel and his team with the Colorado Blueprint that have been really bringing together their own coalition that he can talk more about in a few minutes here, of all of these food access and food security and other types of members that we weren't able to do as comprehensively. And so it's just been a great process to continue to expand this, and just really pleased to see where we are. So in between the first and second Food Summit, the pandemic happened. We actually got the first Food Summit in right before the pandemic. And so because of that, we recognized that we couldn't hold a very large in-person convening. And we thought that the holding a virtual conference really wouldn't meet the goals of the summit. Really what we're trying to do is bring together these food and agricultural stakeholders from across the state to build this shared understanding of the complex opportunities and challenges facing our food and agricultural system. And particularly when we have some groups and across different stakeholder groups that are starting from a place of distrust, right? We just thought you can't do that. You can't sort of build the bridges we want to build in a virtual environment. And so what we did was we decided to pivot. The statewide steering committee decided that we were going to host regional conversations that would be much smaller and more focused to what that region wanted to do. And so we held 11 of these across the state, and you can find more information on the coloradofoodsummit.com. Especially, I'll put a link to the 2022 event, but you can see more information about each of those regional convenings, including these really awesome posters that were designed to showcase kind of what happened at those and what came out of those conversations. So then when we actually were able to hold that second food summit, we were able to do it where we could really plan it based on what we saw as some opportunities that were emerging from multiple regions across the state. And so it was really cool to be able to, even though we're having this event in Denver, make sure we're showcasing and being true to what's happening across the state and the region. This year, because we have a year in between events, we were not able to host 11 of those convenings again. But what we were able to do was to host, to have a pretty, I think, comprehensive planning process. And so what I'm going to do just really quickly is to share my screen. What we did, which I think is cool, is as a group, and again, really led by Libby here, we were able to identify many of these different conferences and convenings that are happening across the state, recognizing that particularly in sort of this post COVID, pandemic times, that folks were once again holding these kinds of convenings and meetings in a way that they weren't when we held our regional convenings. And that there was really this opportunity to really understand what was happening and what was taking place at those meetings rather than hosting something ourselves. Because of course, what's being showcased there is inherently what the priorities are of the region. And so we had a wonderful consultant, Jenny Lee Harris from El Paso County, who went through and did this process where she looked through all of the notes and agendas from all of these, and then also held listening sessions with folks from the regions to say, here's what I'm sort of seeing as the priorities that are emerging from these documents. Is this correct? And then based on that, what she did was to develop this really cool and I think very comprehensive list of what those priorities were. And you can see this really awesome, I think, diagram that Karina Branson put together that kind of highlights these different priorities from across the region. So then what we did was, as the statewide steering committee, we used these to determine what the priorities were going to be for this summit. And I think you'll see that the activity or the speakers and the sessions are really based on these things. So what we did this year also was to have track leads for each of the sessions based in part on who was sort of the coordinator or coalition leader across that topic, and who provided some also financial support. And so we have the Governor's Food Systems Advisory Council that Libby Christensen facilitates right now, that's leading the track bringing policy down to earth. As the CSU Food Systems Institute and CSU Extension, I've been leading the key factors in food and agriculture and also putting our money where our mouth is. Then we've had Joelle as with the Colorado Blueprint to End Hunger, leading this effective approaches to addressing hunger. And then I think the thing I'm most excited about is that Monique has really led the charge with funding support from the Colorado Department of Agriculture in elevating this young leaders track. So in previous years, we have had a youth sort of next generation track, but it was never led by the young leaders themselves. And this year we actually have support to do that. And I think it's really exciting. So I think with that, what I'm going to do is turn it over to Monique and to Jay to talk a little bit about the young leaders track, if that's okay.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Becca.
Okay, I'm just going to share a couple of quick images to get us going here. Give me 1 second. And are you seeing a slide? Okay, awesome. So before we jump in, just want to also flag that the summit is really excited to have as many diverse voices as possible, ranging across the food system and across the state. To support this effort, we were able to award around $25,000 in financial assistance to participants who applied. That covers the costs of travel to the summit round trip using the Colorado State mileage reimbursement sort of figure, as well as support with lodging during the summit and childcare. So we're really excited that we have the opportunity to do that. There were around 150 participants that applied for themselves and their communities, and those announcements went out yesterday. Oops. So what I'm really here to talk about is the Young Leaders track at the Food Summit. As Becca mentioned, this is being supported through a Next Generation in Ag Leadership Grant through the department. This is a logo that was designed for the track. And last year, we were able to bring young folks in to talk about the great things that they're doing in their community in a panel format. And after the event and reaching back out to folks who participated, the students that were there as well through their survey and feedback, it was kind of identified that, well, yeah, it was great that we were there, but we were kind of just there. We didn't really have a lot of say in what we were able to do, the activities we were able to participate in. So, you know, how much were we really involved versus just being a feature? And we wanted to definitely change that, that sentiment, right? We don't want to have our young people feel like they're being tokenized for any reason. And so it was time to sort of put the power in their hands to say, this is your food system, and how do you want to evolve it? So we've moved away from just having them up on a stage to now developing a complete host committee of representatives. All of the students are being paid for their participation. This map shows you sort of where they're coming from and the split between urban and rural identities. And this is a quick shot of those who are participating in the committee. So very similar to the process used for identifying the issues that will be discussed in the other tracks at the summit. This particular group representing their communities went through a number of activities to identify what they see going on in their neighborhoods, around them, in, you know, at places where they get food, places where their families get food, farms, rural areas. The topics they've covered are quite vast, and they have developed a complete track that Jay will talk about in a minute. The opportunity is to bring in young people from around the state. So we have funding to support 50 participants in the Young Leaders track. This will cover their registration, their hotels, their travel, and some of their meals. And so we're really excited to spread this opportunity far and wide. I have some flyers that I'll drop in the chat when we're wrapping up here so that you can help us start recruiting some of these young folks. But I'll turn it over to Jay to talk a little bit more about why this and the experience they had last year.
Thank you, Monique. Yeah, so last year I was in just a small panel at the Food Summit, and it was a great experience. But we came back this year and just noticed, yeah, that as much as we loved being there, that we wanted to be heard a little bit more and be more involved in the conversation. And through that, we've created an entire day with sessions, vesting from food waste to food access to agriculture. We have lots of fun sessions we're going to be doing, run by different members of the youth track. And it's been a very exciting opportunity to be able to hear from other young people across the state and hear what they want and what changes we need. And our main goal was to just be heard when some people in our group do not have ability to vote. They don't have ability to really speak out in another way, along with trying to make sure that other people, like other young people, can see that they're able to also speak up and have their voices heard and learn more. Some topics aren't, like you said, like they don't cross, you know, like food access and then ag, you know, people don't like to talk about those at the same time. So as young people, we want to show other young people that they are connected and that we have a say. Yeah. That's gonna go.
That's excellent, Jay. What has been your feedback from all the youth that you've been working with?
Sorry, I couldn't hear that from you.
I'm sorry. What has been the feedback from the youth that has been involved in this that you've had a chance to work with?
A lot of it has been, well, from last year and the couple of people that I worked with. Something we all agreed on is that we felt like, yeah, like young people, it was important for us to be there, but we did not have a lot of people hearing us and not a lot of time to really showcase what we were trying to explain, especially because each of us in that panel kind of had our own thing. We had our own organizations, we had our own goals going into it, and only given about an hour of time to explain through all of those things. And yeah, feeling a little kind of tokenized, feeling like being the only young people there and not being taken as seriously. So this year we've been really trying really hard to make some amazing sessions that can show that we know what we're talking about, and also give the opportunity for everybody to show what they know and what they're knowledgeable about.
That's fantastic. I know everybody's excited to see it and to hear from you and all these youth. So thank you for doing all of that.
Of course.
The group has put in quite a bit of work. They've been meeting every other Tuesday night since July. And as you can imagine, their schedules are just as busy as ours. So really a lot of kudos goes out to their commitment to making this a great experience for hopefully all of the young people that will come from across the state.
Oh, it's wonderful to have their voices. So great. Excellent. Well, Libby, would you share with us your track and how you chose it, how it was chosen, and how it's sponsored?
Of course, and I would also want to just highlight that the track topics were really identified in the previous year, and so what we see is that there's consistency across multiple years about a better understanding of just what is policy, what are the key factors in food and agriculture, what are issues and topics around food access and nutrition security. And so we're seeing some consistency in those themes, and then just each year we're kind of nudging it or changing it slightly, and also responding back to the feedback. So last year there was a pretty intensive evaluation process. We solicited feedback in a lot of different ways. Some of those were comments in the moment, like people would just write on pieces of paper and hand those in. And also we did a formal post-event survey and try to really reflect on what we heard from folks, and use that to nudge or change or shape our sessions moving forward. And so the session that the Colorado Food System Advisory Council has really taken a leadership role in helping to support and provide guidance is on bringing policy down to earth. And so I think many of us, when we think about food and agriculture and policy, our brains go to the Farm Bill. But I know that is a pretty behemoth of legislation. And so we try to figure out how to make these into smaller bite-sized pieces that would be accessible for everyone that was participating, and also giving folks really clear, actionable next steps that they can take home in their own communities, be they working in northwestern Colorado in Craig or Moffat County, or down in the southeastern corner in Lamar. And so our kind of topic is around this Food Policy 101, and really encouraging and supporting folks to be more effective advocates in their communities. And so here again on the website, we can go and check out the different tracks. So we're second day, Friday, December 8th. The first track that's really going to go in the policy section is just helping folks do a better job telling your story. One of the things when we were thinking about the Farm Bill was seeing oftentimes just the same farmer rancher organization is engaged in conversations when the Farm Bill brings the visibility of food and agriculture kind of the forefront. And so when we have our federally elected officials come back home to our state, they go and talk to ranchers, they oftentimes end up talking to those same farmers and ranchers. And so the first session that this is in this track will be focusing on, we'll have a faculty from Colorado State University in the political science department leading participants in a workshop about how to really think how do you take your idea or something that you're passionate about and thinking about moving that to policy and having your conversation and telling your story. So we're pretty excited about that, that hopefully folks will be able to walk away with that next step about being able to communicate and tell their story. The next session for us is on what does the right to farming mean in 2023? And so right to farm is primarily a non-nuisance clause. So lots of communities have adopted that farming operations have a right to do their operation. And so if you have a new neighbor or a new business coming in, they can't necessarily change your production practices. So they can't complain about dust, noise, trucks, those kind of things. But thinking about the issue of what right to farm, are there new opportunities that exist? And then how do we contextualize those conversations as we're coming to acknowledge and better understanding of the longstanding history of land grabs and resource grabs, primarily from our Indigenous communities. And so trying to create a space where we can have that conversation, and a conversation that isn't necessarily happening, kind of going to Jay's point about these conversations kind of happen in isolation, and the Food Summit is really a space to bring these conversations together. So we have an expert on Indigenous water rights. We also have an individual that's working in Montezuma County, talking about land access and adding additional clauses or considerations for Indigenous land access in those land conservation practices happening in the Western Slope. And then also an individual that's working with Indigenous youth in rural communities, talking about what that's looking like in their communities. And then the third and final session in our track is about bringing policy down to earth, is thinking about how do you take, we're going to hear from 3 examples of individuals and organizations that have identified an opportunity in their community and then moved it from an idea to actual implementation. So we'll hear from representatives from Denver to talk about their Healthy Food for Denver Kids initiative and the years of success that they've had there in establishing a commission to support and the distribution of those funds. We'll also hear about the Boulder Sugary Beverage Tax. And then finally, the Healthy School Meals for All, how folks, it was a grassroots movement that people saw that the success of the Universal Meal Program that was implemented during the pandemic, and how could we move that to a reality. So those are the 3 sessions that will be happening under that one track.
Well, that sounds fantastic. And I like that idea of, bringing it down to earth, but making it so people can really understand and engage with it, right? Because it can be a huge topic and maybe people don't know what to do in their own state level, county level, whatever. So that's wonderful. Does anybody have any questions for any of our speakers up to this point? They've done such a great job in explaining what's going on and offering up what's going to go on, but just want to throw that out there. Wonderful. Well, why don't we talk with Joel then, and Joel can talk to us about his track and maybe his ideas on how Blueprint to End Hunger chose to sponsor this.
Great, Barb. Thank you. Can you give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen? Okay, great, beautiful. Yeah, so hi everyone. Barb, you're pronouncing it perfectly. It's Joel, like Noel, he, him, with Colorado Blueprint to End Hunger. I'm the executive director of integration over there, as Barb mentioned, overseeing our projects and activities. But the track that we designed, we're calling Effective Approaches to Ending Hunger, to kind of focus on anti-hunger and nutrition security this year. And I'll get a little bit into that, but I think maybe first and foremost, helpful to talk a little bit about what the blueprint is and how we approach, and that might help frame how we designed our track and our subsequent sessions accordingly. But basically, the blueprint, our mission statement, our vision is one of food sovereignty. And simply put, it's a Colorado where every person living here can access the food they choose. So there's that element of choice and cultural appropriateness, where they want it in their local communities. There's also a bit of economic sovereignty entailed in that. You have land and water access, and those profits from food production stay within that community. And when they need it, there's that issue of frequency there, meaning not hungry. It means you get 3 square meals a day. The blueprint was began in 2016, approximately, by the Colorado Health Foundation, kind of as first a policy initiative. But we wanted to identify how we could really address hunger as a social determinant of health. So there was a major statewide listening session, hundreds of partners involved to kind of suss out what would be the best ways to attempt to address hunger meaningfully in Colorado. So over the course of those couple of years, the blueprint was written. There's an actual document on our website. I linked in the chat at the very beginning of the webinar, endhungerco.org, that kind of identifies all the existing literature and why we felt that these 5 goals, which I'm about to go over now, were the right ones to appropriately address hunger in Colorado. But the goals as they currently stand are increased public understanding and awareness about solving hunger issues. That's public and political will and communications around hunger, framing the issue appropriately so that folks get fired up around it. Goal number 2 is increasing the number of Coloradans who have local access to nutritious food. That's in the retail setting in their communities. They can purchase healthful, culturally appropriate food in their local communities. The third is increasing the number of Coloradans who have access to food in charitable food settings. So acknowledging that, some folks occasionally we need charitable food to help address acute hunger, but also making sure that that food is healthful and culturally appropriate. So it ties very closely with goal 2. Goal number 4 is maximizing federal nutrition assistance programs like SNAP and WIC, so that Colorado can be a leader in these areas where everyone who is eligible for these programs is enrolled so long as they need it. And goal number 5, maximizing enrollment in Colorado and child nutrition programs, both inside and outside of schools. So not just National School Lunch, which is now our Healthy School Meals for All program in Colorado as of this year, but also during summer and also at child and adult congregate feeding sites as well. So how can we look at these different programs and initiatives and ensure that everybody has the food that they want where they need it? We're kind of structured. We're a collective impact entity, so we don't have a ton of staff. We only have 7 folks. We are small but mighty. But what we try and do is we try and garner the collective support of stakeholders in different communities around different issues and form large tents so that we can come together collaboratively underneath these goals to address specific topic areas and project teams is what we call them. So specific, like 6-month to 24-month long initiatives to address certain things under these goals. A good example right now is with the Healthy School Meals for All that I mentioned passing. Now the lunch lines are longer because a lot more kids are taking hot lunch in their schools, which is great, but we need to support our schools with implementation as well. So how can we do that accordingly? One of the things we're looking at is how do we address time to eat? So making sure that kiddos have enough time to actually sit down and enjoy their meals rather than, trying to wolf everything down. I know my kiddo says some days she gets about 2 or 3 minutes. So looking at flexible ways we can work with schools to decrease the burden and kind of expand their options in making these programs more accessible. Additionally, you can see that this is all 100% in Spanish, that we also have committees as well. We look at different focus areas of power, not just fiscal power, but legislative power, data power, communications power. These are all forms of influence that some community organizations may or may not have access to. So we create committees around each one of these kind of pillars so that we can redistribute these forms of power into community and make them more accessible. So the top, kind of how I'm reiterating over and over again is how can we expand community resources and make community more powerful in addressing hunger locally, rather than us, trying to take ownership over local initiatives. I'm not based in Dolores. I'm not based in Lamar. I'm not based in Sterling. I can't speak on behalf of these communities, but what I can do is listen to these communities and understand what their needs are and try and support them in doing their work better. Some of the ways we do that, community investments are huge. We're the current administrators of the Colorado Food Pantry Assistance Grant. It's about $4 million last year in this year's state fiscal budget that we distributed directly to food pantries, local charitable organizations that have a food pantry on site for folks to receive food. So we distribute that to about 245 pantries this year. They're ongoing and spending it down. And then we also have local community grants that we try and stand up in other initiatives. We look at things like supporting local retailers and improving their point of service sales machines for WIC and SNAP benefits. We look at things like increasing capacity at local pantries so that they have better cold storage or supply chains. We look at things like supporting local communities and messaging the Healthy School Meals for All with community grants that have just gone out. So more on the track, now that you kind of get a sense of how we like to operate. When Becca approached me and said, nutrition security was really, really a highly sought after topic, or a very important priority topic, kind of in conversations last year's food summit, and with the statewide steering committee for planning this year's summit, they, rightfully so, kind of wanted to respond accordingly and make sure there was a solid nutrition security anti-hunger track. So Beck and I have a good longstanding relationship. I said, we are happy to help organize something and kind of provide the logistic support. But what I would really like to do, again, is come back and hear from community directly, and hear from local, counties, local towns, local food coalitions, what their priorities are. And then we can plan a track accordingly, rather than me thinking that I know what folks want to hear. So what we've done is collaborate directly with local food coalitions. There are, scores and scores of them across the state that are doing really good work around advocacy and programming in their local communities to address hunger and food sovereignty. So we wanted to hear from them directly. We wanted to identify what was most important to them that they hear and learn about at the CSU Food System Summit. What practical, kind of next steps they could take away that would make them feel most empowered, so that they would feel like they were really getting something out of it, rather than just having folks talk at them. And then therefore, kind of injecting folks into leadership positions within this planning process and the presenting process, so that we can make sure it's really truly community driven in life. So we came up with 3 sessions as a result. These were completely created by local food coalitions based on their priorities and what they really wanted to learn and hear. So first one is understanding our collective power, roles, and responsibilities. And this is sort of like a reverse structure, I almost call it. So they wanted to hear from kind of the big 4 in the anti-hunger space in Colorado. And that's the Blueprint, that's Colorado State University, and that's also Nourish Colorado, who focuses a lot on local procurement and healthy food incentives, and Hunger Free Colorado, who focuses a lot on SNAP outreach, focuses a lot on SNAP administrative policy. They have their SNAP outline, it's hotline, etc. So what they wanted was, rather than for us to just present at them around, oh, these are the things we're doing, they wanted us to talk about our strategies over the near and long term as they relate to supporting local food sovereignty efforts. And then they wanted us to open ourselves up to a little bit of scrutiny, to be honest, to, some lines of questioning to really understand how we were authentically supporting local community efforts as well. So it's kind of, putting ourselves a little bit in the hot seat, just to kind of hear from folks in community and see the ways that we could improve our strategies, and to really, self-reflect. So I'm really looking forward to this one. I'm going to be there. I'm going to hear directly from community members and see whether or not our strategies truly align with kind of what folks are feeling in that moment. The second, we're calling Beyond Free Food, Changing the Status Quo in Hunger Relief. This is more of a best practices session, hearing from 3 organizations that are doing really, really innovative work. One, Amber Lansing in Dolores, Colorado, southwestern Colorado, Montezuma County. Andrea Loud runs Andrew's Kitchen in Denver, Metro Denver area, and does a ton of great work there. And then Maureen, or Mo, in the San Luis Valley, doing incredible work down there as well. So this is an opportunity to really hear about some stuff that's pushing the needle, and really, really seeing how we can kind of reflect and change and think about more innovative practices when we think about food distribution efforts and charitable food work across the state. And then finally, moving through the mess together, how food coalitions are fumbling forward towards a more equitable local food system. So there's a local nonprofit entity, the Civic Canopy, who has been supporting local food coalitions over the course of the last couple of years with the Colorado Health Foundation and part of their coalition work. And they've sort of been operationalizing some of the goodness, convening coalitions, hearing from them, reflecting on their feedback and their needs. And so this is an opportunity for the Civic Canopy, who's been leading this work, to first and foremost present on what they've learned on working with local food coalitions, so coalitions can all learn and glean from each other, including those not participating in that ongoing work with the Health Foundation, but also for us to kind of create an opportunity for a group discussion, a fishbowl, where we can kind of talk through some of these barriers, really, to operationalizing the work that coalitions are doing and really leveling it up. If we want to effectively end hunger, address hunger, what does it look like? How can we kind of address these barriers collectively? So those are kind of the 3 tracks we've designed through that community input process with local food coalitions. Really excited to have coalitions come and participate. under, at our invitation, and also to sort of present directly and for them to really have their priorities sort of discussed, in detail at the upcoming summit. So really excited, really grateful to CSU to offer this opportunity to us so that we could offer it outward. But happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Does anybody have any questions? I was curious, Joelle, when you were explaining all of that's going to go into this, who is attending this summit? I know you mentioned there's some people that you've reached, or Colorado Blueprint and Hunger, but yourself, you've reached out to have there, but who else is attending this? So what kind of feedback are you planning to get?
Yeah, we've been trying to publicize as much as possible and offering scholarships and invitations to folks within our network to attend. So hopefully, we get a good sort of scattering of food coalitions from across the state to participate. Anti-hunger leaders as well, kind of working in the space, because it's all food systems work. We're all integrated into it together, and I don't want it to be like there's always sort of been this like not intentional, but a gap in sort of food production work and efforts and kind of like anti-hunger advocacy efforts traditionally in this space. I've been doing this work a long, long time, but I think that gap is narrowing. So I want to see it completely disappear because it's all around the same outcomes. It's empowering local production, food access, water access, and then thinking about how that supports local communities so that folks where food is being produced aren't going hungry, because that's just, there's such a paradox there. But, Becca, I would invite you as well. Who do you traditionally see participating, and is there kind of a shift in who's participating this year versus years past?
Yeah, I mean, so as Joelle said, we do our best to send out information throughout, all of our vast networks, from farming groups to various nonprofits, and those nonprofits could be, more in the production space or water advocacy space or nutrition security space. We send it out through the CSU food systems team, the Colorado Department of Agriculture. I mean, so we really try hard to spread the word as much as possible. I would say last year, the group that we probably had the least participation from was farmers and ranchers, and we're really working hard to make sure that there's sessions that are of value to producers in particular. And one of the things to that end that we're doing this year that we have not yet mentioned is that we're holding a Farm to convening as a pre-summit workshop. And what we're trying to do, this is a partnership between the Governor's Food Systems Advisory Council, CSU, and Nourish Colorado primarily. And we're trying to help to do better coordination from the farm to what we're calling the loading dock, of getting the product into particularly schools, but also other types of larger scale buyers, and particularly because there's a number of incentives that are available to support those efforts that haven't been available to this extent previously. So one of the hopes is that through holding that event where we're really trying to get farmers and ranchers to participate, that we'll be able to get more of them to this event. We have had, we continue to have sponsorship from some of our agricultural commodity groups. So the Rocky Mountain Farmers Union is a sponsor this year. We have Colorado Pork Council as a sponsor. We have the Colorado Potato Administrative Committee and others. But it's hard, I think, one of the challenges in terms of the timing of the event is making sure folks are aware of the sponsorship and financial assistance. And, of course, we're just coming off the farming season. So actually this morning alone, I've had 2 emails from farmers that want to come. So trying to figure out, are there other sort of pockets that we could find to tap into since we've already doled out our financial assistance? So anyway, I think it's every year, I think people meet somebody that's in a sector of the food system that they haven't maybe met or encountered previously. Libby leads up our evaluation efforts and actually was able to quantify the number of new linkages and connections made for folks that responded to the survey. And it's really cool to see that. And We started off the summit last year, and I can put a link to this in the chat box, with a video called A Day in the Life that I think had 9 different people that were in different sectors of the food system. And so the thing I was most excited about including in there was we had 2 ditch riders that were filmed. And, you know, I think when you talk to most folks, especially who are from like the Denver metro area, that's a position in the food system that they've never heard of, right? But they're critical folks in our operating in our food system. So we try to get some of everyone who works across all of the different aspects of the food system. But I think each year we do a little bit better.
That's excellent. Hopefully you will get even more people continue to sign up, because the event is December 8th, correct? So we have a little bit of time, but
December 7th and 8th. And I
7th
will
and 8th.
say that we are getting pretty close to sold out. So for anyone listening to this, I recommend going on our website, coloradofoodsummit.com, and registering as soon as possible. Because I think I always get a lot of emails. Oh, this event has sold out each of the other 2 years, month to 6 weeks in advance, which is right where we are now. And I get a lot of like very sad phone calls, and we cut it off at the number we do because of space limitations, not because we said this is how many people we want. So
excellent. So I'm curious, maybe for all of you, I'm not sure who would like to answer, but I was just curious, what happens after the summit? You know, what are the next steps? Maybe it sounds a little naive, but I'm just curious, where do we go after December 8th? It's done. What happens?
Well, I can give 2 pieces, and then please others chime in. I'm sure Joelle's listening sessions, for example, are going to help inform some of their work. So one of the changes that we have made this year, in response to feedback we received last year, is to really be clear about what are the action items that folks are getting as part of the summit. So to that end, Libby is going to be leading an effort to use Menti, which she can describe more, where we're gathering feedback at the end of each session, just a snapshot of something that folks are going to do or do differently because of something they heard about or someone they talked to at a session, or from a side conversation. We're also trying to explore having a video set up so that anyone who has this idea for an action they want to take can go and just quickly say it in front of the camera, and we can try to document some of those. But all of the Menti pieces, and we'll think about we're still considering other ways to collect this information, will be given to the 2 folks that we're going to have wrap up the whole summit. So Franklin Cruz and Karina Branson. And both of them are artists. Franklin is a spoken word artist, a poet, and Karina is a visual artist who actually put together that planning illustration that I showed earlier. And so the 2 of them will be wrapping up the summit, showing and so visually and hearing what some of these action items are. So we're hoping that sort of inspires people with some of these things of what are all the different things that all this diverse group of stakeholders heard. The other piece is that, as I mentioned, we're planning to hold regional convenings again in 2024. And so Libby Christensen and Brian Copham, Brian's from the Colorado Department of Agriculture, will be leading the second to final session, where we will actually be having groups meet in their regions to talk about what would need to go into that regional convening, who might want to provide leadership, and just some of the preliminary pieces, potentially getting some e-lists together to start that planning process, so that conversation can be continued on a regional level.
Excellent.
Yeah, I would just add exactly what Becca said. You know, the listening sessions can help inform, you know, some of our work in regards to coalition strategy. We're also, you know, going to kind of pick up some of the coalition convening work on a quarterly basis going forward over the next year. And we'll be able to action some of the work that comes out of this. But hopefully there's a lot of really rich discussions that happen in the nutrition security track that we'll be able to capitalize on and kind of move forward with.
You know, just to add one more thing to that, I think we're in a different place than previous years in the sense that we do have some significant pots of funding that are available that are really directly tied to some of the work that we're doing. So, for example, I saw the governor's budget. I mean, we'll see what happens, what ends up going through, but there's some significant resources in there, for example, for mental health. And we're having a whole session this year on mental health and coalition building because we really heard that loud and clear as a priority that came out of a number of regions. So what the hope is that because there are these resources available, Joel and his team have been really incredible in being able to put some of these resources together. Libby and a bunch of folks are overseeing some of the resources at the state level with the new regional food business center. So there's all these places where, I don't see as many of the financial constraints. It's really about what folks want to do and how do we work together effectively. And so hopefully, because there are some of those financial opportunities, we can do things that we haven't been able to do previously.
Excellent. That's great. And maybe another question out to all of you panelists. What are your specific goals for this upcoming summit? When December 8th is said and done, what do you hope to have happened or heard or come away with? Maybe that's different from prior years or overall. Monique, what do you think?
I'm really excited about the blueprint leading the track on food sovereignty and actually having the opportunity to take feedback. I think it's a rare occasion when leadership puts themselves in that place of vulnerability to say, okay, we're all here together. We're all in this room. We're all working on the same thing. Let's use this time wisely. So I'm very excited to see how that shapes up and how it can be a model for other leadership organizations around the state. I think it's a really exciting opportunity. Of course, I am over the moon and thrilled by the effort put in by our young people so far. And so really my focus at the event is just to support them in achieving whatever it is they're hoping they and their participants get out of the day. So I'll kind of have a laser focus there, but we'll be peeking in on that blueprint session for sure.
Great. Well, Jay, with that, what are your goals for this summit?
I feel like my goals are to motivate young people and pick out the ones that we know they want to be involved. We know they want to do things. And then giving kind of smaller things that younger people can do just in their own personal lives regarding food waste and like recipes. And my major goal is to just inspire and motivate other young people to see what they want to do and hear their words. And I think my other selfish goal is just a little bit of fun and prove that like the conversations can be fun. I know one of our young leaders sessions is going to be a Jeopardy game, which I'm really excited about. So I'm hoping that it's going to be a lot of fun and not just talking. People can also get involved with each other. So.
Oh, excellent. That's a great idea. And let's not make it so heavy that we want people to be engaged. We want people to join it. So let's make it a little bit of fun's great. Libby, what are your goals?
I feel incredibly fortunate of my position that I get to go out and visit these communities. I get to present to classes in Castle Rock, or I get to go hang out with Monique and Pueblo and see all of the cool work that they're doing, or down in southwestern Colorado. And so in some ways, I love seeing the opportunity where people that are in different corners of my life getting to come together and the share and the cross exchange of ideas, and realize that there's so much innovation and amazingly cool work that's happening across the state, and that there's a lot of opportunity for those folks to maybe think about working together a little bit closer, or maybe trying a program that works in Sterling and might try it in Cocopaxi. I don't know, like that's the opportunity that I'm really excited about, thinking about how do we work better together.
Excellent. Joelle?
That's great. I think Monique phrased it perfectly. You know, I'm really excited for an opportunity to kind of gain that feedback to just bring folks together and hear their perspectives. And like I said, close that gap even more. That, you know, it's sort of the production, the food growing and the charitable food gap, anti-hunger gap.
Fantastic. And how about you, Becca?
I guess two things, one is that I think the hardest part of my job is when I see folks that have the ability to work together, but that there's some reason why there's, animosity or challenges in actually like bridging those gaps. And that can exist in many different ways across urban and rural, or the type of farming system, or, whatever it is. And I'm not naive enough to think that we're going to hold a summit and think that everything's just going to be magically better in some of those spaces. But I think that if we don't do things like hold summits, that we continue to have, some exacerbated polarization or sort of lack of understanding, maybe, or willingness to try to understand. And so what I hope from the summit is that people meet somebody who has a different experience, or lives in a different place, or something that makes somebody think, oh, I didn't know that, or this really tested an assumption I had. So it sort of gets them a little bit out of their comfort zone, and maybe allows them to be a little bit vulnerable before maybe we make a judgment. If we see something in the news or whatever it is that we think, I wonder if that's true. I met this person who experienced something like that. Maybe I should give them a call and ask them if that's how they're experiencing it. So that's what I hope, is that there's something that happens there. And then I think the other bit of it is kind of what Libby was saying more, is that there are these opportunities where we have just so many great people doing great things, but sometimes it happens on sort of an individual, it's just this one person who works their tail off to make something happen in their community. And I think if we can help use an event like the summit to say, look at what this really great person's doing, how do we take that energy and sort of spread it around, right? Of course, it's going to look different in different places. And we had a planning session yesterday for one of the sessions I'm leading at the summit. And I had never met any of the panelists. I'd only met the facilitator before. And it was just even that, I feel so fortunate that I get to talk to these incredible people from all around the state doing really cool work that I had no idea about. So I hope other people walk away with something similar.
Yeah, that would be great. Just connecting people and share what's going on and working together, right? Well, Jeff had a really good question he put in the chat. We'll just share it. What is the age range, the target age range for the youth at this event? Monique mentioned high school and up. So that's excellent. What would be the youngest you think we're going to see, Monique?
We have one person on the host committee who snuck in as an 8th grader.
Okay.
So I wouldn't be surprised if she recruits a couple of folks from her school to participate, but the idea is high school and up. And I know there are a couple of folks who are bringing youngsters that are on the edge. And so we'll do our best to accommodate all of the young people who are able to register.
Excellent. Well, this has been fantastic. Are there any other questions for our panelists? Well, I really want to thank Monique and Libby, Becca, Joelle, and Jay had to step off. He's coming back. For all of your time. I know your schedules are very, very busy. And of course, you're planning this incredible summit. So thank you for sharing it with our Colorado Proud members. And, Colorado Proud members, sign up, go to the website. If you're interested, like Becca said, it's almost sold out. But get involved. This is fantastic. And also to our Colorado Proud members, don't forget to tune in to our podcast on Cultivation Station. Later this month, we're going to be talking with some experts on how to stay on top of business opportunities. For sure, in the agricultural food business, every season's the busy season. It never seems to end. But it can be really hard to remind ourselves, apply for grants, stay on top of business opportunities. So we're going to learn some great tips and tools on how to do that at the end of November. So tune in for that. And again, thank you all so much for joining us and for your time. And we look forward to the Food Summit in December.